Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone, and peace be upon you all. Welcome to the Roswell Mayoral debate hosted by Roswell Community Masjid. My name is Hamza Tariq, and I will be today's debate moderator. I'm also joined by Shaheen, who will be today's timekeeper. It's so good to have you with us today. Thank you all for your engaged care, whether you're tuning in virtually or here in person. Your dedication to showing up is what makes our community so special and resilient. I would also like to thank our candidates, Mayor Lori Henry, Kurt Wilson, Jason Mayoral, for accepting today's debate invitation. This is RCM's 4th year hosting a municipal election debate. Our community is committed to cultivating a vibrant civic life, and this debate is a crucial part of that. We hope it provides the community with the meaningful information it needs to make informed decisions in the upcoming Roswell elections on November 2nd. Today's debate will consist of 6 questions. Candidates will answer in alphabetical order. The first candidate for each question has 2 minutes to respond, and the following candidates all get 1 minute to answer. Shaheen will raise her hand when you have 30 seconds remaining, and again when you have 5 seconds remaining. If absolutely needed, rebuttal should be kept at 15 seconds. We ask that candidates please respect the time limits, and most importantly, to please respect each other. Our community will not tolerate any disrespect. And with that, I will ask each candidate to please introduce themselves, starting with Mayor Henry.
Thank you very much. My name is Lori Henry, and thank you so much for RCM for hosting this event this evening. This is truly an integral part of our community. I would also like to thank my loyal supporters for being here and watching the live feed. These are uncommon times in our community. And under my leadership, Roswell stayed open while other cities shut down. We didn't miss a beat due to strong fiscally conservative budgeting, due to retiring debt, and those conservative principles. We were able to roll back the millage rate to 4.78. This hadn't been seen since 1988. That is a feat in itself. Our business not only survived COVID, but are thriving due to a number of the measures we took, and special thanks to my Business Recovery Task Force. They are credited with authoring the Come Back Safely campaign, which has given confidence to our citizens as well as our businesses post-COVID, even though we're not post-COVID. Public safety is number 1. While other cities talked about defunding police, we gave our police officers a raise. During my tenure, we hired a new police chief. He instituted 21st century policing policies. The result is crime is down, and we only have 3 vacancies in our police department in the city of Roswell. That's unprecedented. Hasn't happened in over 20 years. I would also like to mention T-Splosh 1. That's coming to a close in November, and we will have T-Splosh 2 on the ballot. Both of these equal about $70 to $80 million, and the T-Splosh 2 includes pedestrian, bike improvements, operations, and safety projects. I would also like to add that numerous projects proposed in T-Splosh 2, I'm running out of time here, are the much-needed transportation improvements identified by the East Roswell Economic Action Committee to promote economic development. And what I will do is reserve my remaining comments for closing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Kenza. I greatly appreciate the great opportunity to be here. And thank you, Mayor Henry, for being here and for your service. And thank you, candidate Yao, for being here. And thank you for your hosting this. I'd like to pivot, I guess, for a minute, because I hope in the course of the next 50 minutes that I hopefully make a compelling case as a candidate. But I think the first thing I'd like to address in terms of the introduction, and Lori and I were just talking about this, is that in our small community of 103,000 people, I can't think of a better place to talk about honoring one another than here. And particularly in the middle of the campaign where there's the temptation to be vicious and cruel to one another, seeking a small political office of city council or mayor. And the truth of the matter is that our city has been fighting in turmoil for several years now. And it's time that we heal this city, regardless if it's Mayor Henry that's the mayor, regardless if it's candidate Yao that's the mayor, regardless if it's me that's the mayor. It's time, and I ask the citizens that are on, whoever's supporting whatever candidates they're supporting, to stop the fight, to stop the factionalism. Because the reality of the matter is that we're not fighting over freedom. We're having skirmishes that are way too loud over quality of life issues. And we can solve those together without causing the great acrimony that we are in the city. So that's my plea to you, my fellow citizens, my fellow candidates, and that we act differently in this election season. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yao.
My name is Jason Yowell. I've been a resident of Roswell for over 25 years, and I would like to restore Roswell to be the shining city upon a hill that it once was. Roswell used to be the aspirational city, and now Roswell has become a cautionary tale, the butt of jokes because of the dysfunction. And there is a root cause of the dysfunction that I have identified, and that is a lack of leadership by the top official in the city. And the top official in the city has sought to defer all judgment and decision-making to staff. Now, I know how this works. People get elected, staff sits them down, tells them, well, you don't really know how things are. We were here before you. We're going to be here after you. We can help you because you don't really know, and we do. Well, that's not leadership when you just say, well, staff, tell me what to do, and I will execute your agenda. I have a different agenda than staff. I have years, decades of knowledge in the construction and real estate development industries. I know how the pieces go together. And you can't put a plan in front of me that's a piece of garbage and think that I'm going to fall for it. I'm not. I also know how to handle real estate contracts. We've got a city attorney who is he's a very expensive attorney. He costs $160,000 a year, but he actually is much more expensive because he costs us millions of dollars every year. When the current incumbents came into office 4 years ago, I told them point blank, between the time that they were elected and the time that they took office, that they needed to get rid of certain personnel, most in particular the city attorney and the transportation director, or they would never get control of the city. And I was right, and Oxbow is the proof. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for your introductions. Moving on to the questions. The first question goes to Mayor Henry. When planning for growth, what specific policies would you adopt today to quicken the pace of economic growth and hiring? You have 2 minutes.
To pick up the pace, well, number one, we need to hire the economic development director. That's key. That person, as I describe it, is the vessel of knowledge, the gatekeeper to the city. All economic development, that is who Roswell Inc. should work through, as who our DDA should work through, because that's a person that is going to be focused solely on economic development. And I think that that's key, because the rest of us that have numerous focuses have a difficulty of maintaining that focus on any one issue. And I feel very strongly that this person is a person that will keep this on the forefront. Also, this is a professional that can handle economic development, that understands economic development. I understand some folks don't agree with our professionals on staff, but actually I think our professional staff gives us good advice. I might not always take that advice, but they provide it and they know that they are free to give it.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, Ken, I think the growth of Roswell kind of is the second critical question where we are today as a city. We've grown rapidly over the last 3 decades in terms of population, in terms of economic development. But I think where most of us feel today is that we've got some stagnation going, and we've been very successful as a city at doing plans and building plans. We just haven't been successful at getting those plans executed. And I think that is paramount at this time. It's one of the principal reasons I decided to run, was that I believed I could be effective in terms of not only implementing but executing. And I think the first really responsibility of the mayor and city council is to create the vision for the city and then get the bureaucracy from the CAA down to an economic development director to follow that vision. But I think the vision starts with the citizens who elect the city council and mayor and say, this is what we want. It's time for us to get that done.
Thank you. Mr. Yowell.
I think we have to be realistic about what economic development is possible. We're not going to become corporate headquarters. That ship has sailed. The land has all been developed residentially. There's not enough critical mass for that kind of development, nor is there probably the appetite for it without a MARTA line coming to Roswell. The future in economic development is as a destination city. We have, as one of our citizens has said repeatedly, we won the geography lottery. We have the history, we have the natural attractions, we have so much to bring people in, and the best thing about tourism money is it's money from outside. People are paying taxes that don't live here. That's the best kind of tax money you can get.
Thank you. For this next question, we'll start with Mr. Wilson. How will you balance the need to reduce traffic and increase walkability with attracting more commercial activity in busy areas?
Yes, so the question is really about infrastructure. And I'll start with a report from a quote by the conclusion of the East Roswell Economic Action Committee from January 31st, 2020. And what they said in conclusion was, and they're talking about the east side, but this is relevant to the west side. To grow the east side economy now requires the political will, organizational changes, and lots of funding. And the time for that to happen is past due. And that really is the cornerstone of what the question is referenced to. Infrastructure, the infrastructure investment is significant, and we have to have the political will, and that's what I'm suggesting as a candidate for mayor, that we are going to have the political will. We are going to execute significant infrastructure on the east side of the city as well as the west side of the city. It is time now for this city to invest in its future. If this is going to become the #1 family community in America, which I believe Roswell will be, it's going to take some investment. And that investment starts first and foremost along the lines of infrastructure, walkability, connectivity. There have been some things that we have had hanging around us as a city because of the political stagnation, because of the political fighting, that have made it difficult for us to move forward. One of the reasons, again, I'm running for mayor is to step over this factionalism that's occurring and saying, guys, it's time for us to get something to do. I need the help of the citizens. I need a clear vote from the citizens that they support and understand that we are going to do significant things in the city. We're going to adopt the Riverwalk project, which has been on the shelf since 2016. It's an excellent project. It takes a significant investment. We're also going to have to do dredging along the Chattahoochee River. There are several communities in terms of infrastructure that we need to do the same, where we have constant flooding because we don't have the sufficient infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yowell.
Transportation is the lifeblood of any community, and unfortunately the focus of our local RDOT, the Roswell Transportation Department, has been to turn us into a cut-through community at the expense of our quality of life and the traffic that we deal with. The focus really should be on facilitating the traffic within our community, not increasing the volume of traffic that flushes through the community. And what people don't seem to understand is that traffic engineers are judged by two basic metrics. One is how much money did they touch, and the second is how much additional traffic did they flow. And what they see in our T-SPLOS money is an opportunity to build their resumes on our backs, and they see Georgia 400 and Cobb County as the opportunity to spend that money in that direction. Everything that they're doing in T-SPLOS is geared toward cut-through traffic, not fixing the traffic within our community. That is a problem.
Thank you. Mayor Henry?
Well, I'd like to make a couple of comments. One of my opponents mentioned environmental issues, and I would like to mention that next month we will have our second annual River Summit. We had our first one before COVID, and what I did is I brought together all of the players. It's all of the folks that are involved in our rivers. So whether it's riverbank destruction, whether it's the Corps of Engineers releasing too much water at a too high rate of velocity, and whether it or not it's a safety issue. And we do have safety issues on our river. So I'm working with these folks to come together with a viable resolution to what we can do on the river. It is not the city of Roswell's responsibility to dredge the river. It is our responsibility to bring together the players that can make this happen, and it will be a joint resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to question number 3, starting with Mr. Yowell. Would you support a city non-discrimination ordinance which would protect against discrimination in the workplace, housing, and public accommodations? Why or why not?
Well, absolutely. I think any discrimination is bad business because you are precluding people from the talent pool, and that's just, it's just not good economic policy to do that. I don't know why anybody would oppose legislation to eliminate discrimination. It's kind of a no-brainer. I'd like to, there's not much to say about that beyond, I'd like to talk about the environment a little bit because our city is under environmental assault, and again, it's by RDOT. All their plans are too much asphalt, too much additional impervious surface, and a tremendous amount of tree cutting that is absolutely encroaching into our watershed. The Gateway project coming up is an unmitigated disaster that will clear 2.5 acres between Highway 9 and Victory Creek. It will introduce a tremendous amount of impervious surface without any real mitigation to that. And the tree clearing in the middle of the river corridor is just unconscionable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Henry?
Didn't I already answer that question about environmental issues?
No. So I'm going to repeat the question for you. Would you support a city non-discrimination ordinance?
Oh, absolutely.
Which would protect against discrimination in the workplace, housing, and public accommodations? You have 1 minute.
Absolutely, and what I brought together about a little over a year ago was our racial equity task force. We have been meeting on a regular basis, and it's numerous people from numerous communities, and our focus is what has Roswell done and what can Roswell do better. And I would also like to mention that our hiring practices we have found recently are very inclusive, and I would look forward to promoting the racial equity within our city because that's very, very important. It's important to our community, and it's important to me. So for me, it is a must, and I have been working on that on a regular basis, and I will continue to work on it. No stone is unturned.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
Thanks. I think in terms of the question, if there's a citizen opposed, it would be an interesting opposition. But I think really what the question is kind of addressing is, are we taking care of all of our citizens? And I want to credit Mayor Henry. She made an appointment at the beginning of her administration. She appointed a young lady by the name of Karen Parrish to run the Roswell Housing Authority. Now, it's not sexy to talk about housing authorities, but Karen Parrish has done yeoman's work, a superstar. Why is that significant to you and I as citizens? Because she has kept the Roswell Housing Authority certified. If it becomes decertified, it falls under the purview of the federal government, basically HUD. And that basically changes the opportunities to change our zoning laws. So we lose the opportunity to have those discussions at a local level. And because of this great person, she's helping to protect the poorest among us.
Thank you. Moving on to question number 4, starting with Mayor Henry. Given that all parts are connected, what action have you taken and what action will you take in your elected position to combat climate change?
Wow, that's a tough one. And I always ask, what can we do at the local level? And we go back to environmental issues. It's cutting down trees. It's not dealing with water quality from runoff. And it's as simple as picking up after your dog. All of those things play into the environment. Now, what can we do at the local level? I don't think we'll have the impact that China will have on our environmental issues globally. But I think that if we all look to our recycling, things that we can do at a local level, we need to do. I'll tell you another thing too. We just instituted the historic plants or the native plants, and that's key to our environment. We don't have to water those as much. We can live within a carbon footprint. There are a lot of things that we can do. I know that I will fight very hard to get MARTA to return many of our bus routes to the city and improve on that. Because if we have public transportation, which I will say Roswell is very, very supportive of, public transportation helps us to reduce our carbon footprint. So I think those are the things that we can do at a local level, but most importantly, the buy-in at the local level on how we deal with things. And I will tell you, the city of Roswell is very environmentally friendly on both sides of the aisle. I think that it's very important that we look at these things. We look at tree canopy, we look at water quality, we look at the amount of water that we're using on a daily basis. And when that is in front of you, it makes it, I think, much more likely that we will play into that global effort.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson.
Thanks, Kenza. Tough question you got there, Lori, because the reality is the municipalities have certain things they can do, but in terms of global impact, it's obviously tough. But being a great community, and my dream of us being the #1 family community in America, does mean having an active stewardship of being in harmony with your community and your environment, and having programs to do that, like tree banking, having active tree banking programs, having active glass recycling programs. But probably more significantly over the long term is an active pursuit of changing not only the carbon footprint, but improving the quality of life through e-mobility programs. I think it's time for Roswell to pursue being an e-mobility city in terms of being available for research and development. Not saying, hey, we need to bring e-mobility cars here, but we need to start putting ourselves on the cutting edge if we really want to have an environmental impact.
Thank you. Mr. Yowell.
There are two principal elements that we as a local governing authority can do to address climate change on the ground. One is to have a more environmentally friendly zoning code, 50-foot front yard setbacks, 100-foot prescribed widths, and prescribed lot sizes are not environmentally friendly. They lead to property being clear-cut, property line to property line. Our tree ordinance is of absolutely no use. It doesn't stop that from happening. And the other part of this is to have a transportation department that is focused on reducing or not expanding impervious surface unnecessarily, and to be using pervious surfaces wherever it's possible. You can't be a bicycle-friendly community if your bicycle lanes are in the street, because it's got to be asphalt, it's got to be ready to take the weight of trucks, and you can't put pervious surface in the street, but you can put it behind the curb, and you also get a safer bicycle lane in that package.
Thank you. This next question, we're going to start with Mr. Wilson. What steps would you take to improve transparency related to governance?
Yeah, I think that's the dream for anybody, I think, that's in leadership. Effective leadership begins with a lot of things. It begins with vulnerability. It begins with clarity. It begins with asking questions. The word transparency, well, I have to tell you, I always shut the word coming from the corporate culture and the small business culture, because whenever I heard transparency, I always say, run the other way, because you're fixing to get anything but transparency. Because the reality is what most of us want are truth, honesty, character, and integrity. And when you make a mistake, own up to a mistake. Great leadership makes lots of mistakes, but great leadership owns those mistakes and is the first one to call themselves out. Great leadership takes accountability for mistakes that other people make. And that's how you know you got a great leader. When you got a great leader who's taking credit, not taking credit, but giving credit, but taking the accountability for when things go wrong. That's transparency. That's what we want as a people. I think what we want as a people in this country again, in this community again, and this is a tough gig. I mean, Mayor Henry's been under assault, and it's tough when you're under assault all the time to when you're under besieged. This is not an easy gig, but I've been in these kind of leadership roles where I have been under assault, and I understand that you got to take the arrows, and taking the arrows means you take the arrows, because if we're going to solve the acrimony in this city, and Mayor Henry is not at fault for the acrimony, let me be clear, but this acrimony has to be solved. We have to solve the political acrimony in the city, and it starts with the mayor. It starts with the mayor. And that's what we're going to do when we get elected. We're going to solve this acrimony, and we're going to create a culture of huge openness so everybody understands what's going on.
Thank you. Mr. Gowell.
I have to respectfully disagree with Kurt about the source of the acrimony. It lies squarely on the mayor's shoulders. If you want transparency, one of the first things you need to do is to wrest the mute button from the mayor's hands. That is not transparency when the mayor has a mute button. Everybody should be free to hear what goes on in chambers, the good, bad, and the ugly. If you don't like it, that's fine, but you need to know what's really going on. I'd also change the open forum format where right now you have 5 minutes, that's it, no rebuttal. Well, I'm tired of the mayor having the last word and saying things that are patently untrue and not being able to rebut it. Just a few weeks ago, we had an issue we were talking about, of all things, Oxbow. And I took issue with it on numerous counts. And when I was done, she said, I can debate this all night long. I said, great, let's go, right here, right now. Of course, she muted me. All you saw was her wagging her finger at me. That's not transparency. That's not good governance. That's tyranny.
Thank you, Mayor Henry.
Thank you. First, I'd like to talk about transparency. And one of the first things I did before I was even sworn into office was I gave the direction to staff to start live streaming meetings so that folks that couldn't make it to City Hall could watch those videos. They could be in attendance. I've also started coffees with the mayor, lunches with the mayor in our business community. My personal cell phone has been on my campaign materials as well as my City Hall card from day one. You can call me on my cell. I also have an open door policy. I have always had an open door policy. Anyone that requests a meeting, I will grant that. The other thing I would like to point out is, and it's been alluded to, is the Oxbow report. And I conducted an independent investigation into Oxbow when I received, or the council, I should say, received some disturbing news about the project. So we are looking into that, and we will have that report from Gerard and Davis by the end of the month. And I am here to tell you I've had a hands-off approach on this because I did not want to be accused of meddling. But as soon as I get that report, council will get that report, and so will the citizens of Roswell. That's transparency.
Can I follow up on that?
No.
Yeah.
Can I follow up on that?
15-second rebuttal,
15 seconds.
sure.
Yeah, I think, you know, I was going to say, the irony to me is probably the lack of transparency. I didn't think that this city council mayor owned Oxbow. I think the mistake that the mayor and city council made was spending $70,000 to do an investigation. It goes to the question of transparency. It goes to the question of accountability. You got to figure that out. Even if it's not your fault, it's fault of the past, it's on you. And to solve it, and that's kind of like what I'm talking about, is like, I don't hold that against you. I know a lot of people do. But spending $70,000 to an investigation, I think you can do that. You don't not spend 70 grand.
I'd like to follow up on that. I agree with you, Kurt, that what an utter waste of money this investigation is. I identified what the problem was, identified who the responsible parties were, and 2 of them are still working for the city, and that's not helpful. The fact of the matter is, the night that they approved the additional $2.5 million for the hardware store property, the mayor actually said, "We have been dealt a bad hand by a previous mayor and council," a council she was on.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the final question, starting with Mr. Yell. What experience do you bring to the job to set policy for a city, and what is your motivation to serve?
Well, for instance, I know a great deal about real estate development, land use, and how to make things happen. And we've got people designing zoning codes and ordinances that have no practical experience making rules for things that they're in charge of. And I find that to be absolutely mind-boggling. The 2014 UDC was such a poorly crafted zoning code, and the things that were done in the course of the implementation violated state zoning procedure law and U.S. constitutional law on so many points and so egregiously that you just cannot believe that anybody can come up with this kind of thing and approve something, go through that kind of a process, and have the disaster that they've had. And I have borne a huge personal brunt of this incompetence. I can fix this kind of thing. I know more about zoning and development than the mayor could ever hope to know. I've done it. She hasn't. But she'll tell you I'm no expert.
Mayor Henry?
Let me just say this, we've got a lot of challenges ahead of us, and I think that we've got a lot of challenges that we need to face. You know, when we talk about zoning and we talk about our professional staff, I beg to differ with many of these issues. And, you know, we're talking about healing the city, and we're talking about a very negative campaign. And I'm not sure how negativity heals the city. But one of the things that I am certain of is Roswell is already the #1 family city in the United States. We're there. Now, can we improve upon it? Absolutely. But to say that we are not there, to say that we are stalled in the mud, to me, that's a negative environment to put us in. Because when I am out talking to people throughout the community, they are telling me that they are happy in the city of Roswell. They live here for a reason. They stay here for a reason.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson?
Well, obviously, we're going to be a little contentious. I hate that because I don't consider it negativity to say I want us to be the #1 family community in America. This is the first time, Lori, that I've heard anybody say that we are currently the #1 family community in America today. That's news to me. And I would not be running for mayor if we were the #1 family community in America. I would say, hats off to you, let me celebrate you, rock and roll, and I would be your #1 supporter. I am not as you could probably tell my comments, I am certainly not against you. I appreciate the fact that Lori Henry is a person that has significant knowledge about this city and is a servant of this city that served the city well. The reason I'm running for mayor is because we do need to become the #1 family community in America. It's going to take a lot of strategy, a lot of leadership, a lot of intentionality, and a lot of vision. And that's not a knock on Lori. And, but I think it's inaccurate to say, I don't think anybody thinks we're the #1 family and community in America today. They love Roswell, I love Roswell, Lori loves Roswell, Jason loves Roswell, but the fact of the matter is, we're not the #1 family community in America today, or I wouldn't be sitting at this podium.
Thank you. All right, thank you. That's it for our questions. Thank you to our candidates for participating today and to our audience for tuning in. Please remember, if you live in the city limits of Roswell, local election day is Tuesday, November 2nd. Oh, so sorry, guys. I was getting ahead of myself. All the candidates have 2 minutes per person to do a closing. Pretend you didn't hear that. Yes, Mayor Henry.
Well, as I told you in the beginning, I would like to follow up on my initial comments. And what I'd like to say is we've done an incredible amount of work on the East Side. 700 people on the East Side responded to numerous questions on how to improve the East Side, how to improve the economic development. Number one was roadway improvements. I told you that those are being included in T+2. And I also told you that, or I will tell you now, that one of the top 5 responses was on the East Side, we have too many apartments. I hear you loud and clear. Now, what do we do about this? We're already starting T+2. These projects are included. And, you know, I look forward to us resolving many of the issues we have. I think one thing alone to improve the transportation flow between the East Side and the West Side is key. We will have Big Creek Parkway to the north. We will have a newly designed Holcomb Bridge that would not have been done had it not been our leadership in the city of Roswell and working with GDOT. So these are strong leadership positions that I really feel as though we should be happy. We should relish in, because we didn't always have those strong bonds with GDOT and many of the other regional players. Our citizens, number one, want public safety and park projects. And I'm proposing in 2022 that we go out for a bond. When we go out for a bond, that's a decision made by the voters of Roswell. That's not a decision made by the elected officials. We go to the voters and we say, let's look at these projects. I'm proposing public safety and our parks projects that we will look at. We can bond out about $100 million for 1 mil. So that is something I'm proposing, because we will take care of transportation projects, hopefully, and then we will look to public safety as well as our parks.
Thank you.
You know, one of the things I think that is so important for the role of the mayor is that the mayor is the first person, the foremost person, to articulate the city's vision. And I also believe, in conjunction with that, is that the mayor is really the foremost person to lead the charge on economic development. In conjunction with that, I think it's the mayor's responsibility to make it easy to do business in our city, as long as that is not business is in accordance with our vision. I think, lastly, with respect to kind of this role as an ambassador, is that the mayor is the ultimate goodwill ambassador to the city, to its people, to its citizens, to your fellow citizens as mayor, to the businesses, to our religious houses of worship, to our civic organizations, to businesses that are looking to come into Roswell. And probably lastly, and it's so critical and it's so complex, is that the mayor is probably the most important legislative liaison to our state legislator, to our lieutenant governor, to our governor, to our congresspeople and senators, and to the respective heads of the state organizations. And so kind of in that piece, 6 weeks from now, you and I will be going to a sacred place. We'll be going to the voting booth. And I would ask you that when you go to the voting booth, I think some questions I would ask a relative, you know, is Roswell in a better place today than it was 4 years ago? Are you excited about the future of Roswell over the next 4 years, the next 10 years, or the next 20 years under the current leadership? Do you see great things ahead for our city? And do you see your elected officials working together? And if the answers to those questions, because Lori was shaking her head, yes, she's obviously going to vote for herself. And you should too, if you believe those things. But if you don't believe those things, I'm asking you to pursue a different path. And I'm asking for your support and your help. My name is Kurt Wilson. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Yowell?
The mayor and the other incumbent city council people rode into office 4 years ago on yellow ball. They were proposing to clear cut a much-loved park with challenging topography, heavily treed, and untold sweat equity hours of community labor in creating what has become a regional destination. What kind of vision is that? What kind of world? But for tennis courts. But it was even worse than that, because I saw the memorandum of understanding between the city and the partner they were going to bring into the tennis court project. It was a disaster. You couldn't possibly want to be on the city side of that contract. You would be foolish. This is what the mayor has to offer. She doesn't understand a bad contract from a good contract. She doesn't understand good land planning from bad land planning. It's all kumbaya and I'm doing a great job, ha ha ha. No, you're not. You're doing a terrible job. And if you weren't, you wouldn't be so unpopular and the city wouldn't be so dysfunctional. The status quo has become dysfunctional, and that won't stop, that won't change with the current elected officials in place and much of the staff leadership. If you don't change the players, you won't change the game. And if you don't change the game, you're going to continue on a trajectory of decline. That's not what we want. We want to move forward. We want to be better. But the path we're on, that's not the path that's going to get us there. Paving our community over, compromising our quality of life for the benefit of commuters and other governing authorities. Yeah, you got a great relationship with GDOT because you sold us out, Lori. You sold us out to GDOT. You gave them our T-Splost money. Of course they love you.
All right, thank you. Again, apologies for getting ahead of myself earlier. I appreciate your patience with me. But thank you again to our candidates for participating today and to our audience for tuning in. And again, if you live within the Roswell city limits, Election Day is November 2nd, and early voting starts October 12th. Thank you all again, and have a great night.
I just good job.
Jason?
Great job, ladies.
Oh, thank you.
Well done. Can I come over and shake it?